Hi, this is Delia from Delia Creates. Today we're going to make a basic witch hat using just single crochet. You need 130 yards of super bulky wool blend yarn, a 6.5mm hook, scissors, yarn needle, and stitch markers in 2 colors. It's hard to see stitches in the black yarn, so I switched to orange yarn to show the beginning. First, create a magic ring, which is basically just a slip knot that you crochet into before closing it up. Insert the working yarn into the loop, pull up a loop, and that is where you insert your hook. By the way, the tail should be twisted into the magic ring. It keeps the first couple stitches from being too wobbly. Yarn over and pull through the loop on the hook to chain 1. This doesn't count as a stitch, it just helps stabilize the magic ring. Use your fingers from the non-hook hand to help hold the magic ring open. Then work a single crochet. Insert your hook into the ring, yarn over, pull through so that you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through both loops. Give the working yarn a tug to keep your tension tight. You can now move that twisted tail out of the way. Then work 6 more single crochet. For more beginner instruction on how to single crochet, check out my Crochet Basics series. To finish the first round, close up the magic ring by holding the starting chain and pulling on the tail. Normally, we'd end the round with a slip stitch to create a circle, but we're going to go right into starting the next round with an increase or 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Skip the chain 1 and work into the top 2 loops of the first single crochet from the previous round. That's 1 single crochet, and then 2. Add your first stitch marker to the last single crochet worked. Work regular single crochet into the next 2 stitches, then increase again with 2 single crochet in the same space. Mark the last stitch worked with your second stitch marker. Single crochet into the next 2 stitches, then in the last stitch before the first stitch marker, start the next round with an increase or 2 single crochets. Move the first stitch marker to the last single crochet worked, then continue the pattern of working regular single crochet up to the last stitch before the next stitch marker, working 2 single crochets or increasing, and then moving the stitch marker to the last single crochet worked. Continue this pattern for about 5 rounds. It should actually count up to 5 rounds to the right of the first stitch marker and 4 rounds on the left side. We're not going to continue this pattern from this point because it will eventually twist and distort the hat top. Instead, we'll vary the increases between the stitch markers for each round. First, we need to work 3 regular single crochets and move the first stitch marker over to the true start of the round so that it counts 5 rounds on all sides. Then move the second stitch marker to the halfway point in the round so that your cone is evenly divided. Now we begin working increases at varied points between each of the stitch markers. So single crochet, then right here, work an increase, then single crochet to the next marker. Single crochet into the space with the stitch marker and then put it back. Then repeat what you did for the first half of the round, work 2 single crochets, then increase. We are going for varied increases but symmetrical rounds, so whatever you do for one half, do for the other. Single crochet to the next stitch marker, work through the stitch marker, then pick a new spot to increase for the new round. Just make sure it's not too close to the previous round's increase. If you do, you risk creating a seam and some distortion. Now single crochet through the second stitch marker and repeat the pattern from the first half. Continue working varied but symmetrical increases between the first and second stitch markers for a total of 28, 31, or 34 rounds depending on the size you're making. After several rounds, you can already see the varied or random increases pay off. The cone is even no matter which way you fold it, which doesn't happen otherwise, and you don't really have an identifiable seam. Reminder, pulling the working yarn tight after each stitch is important. We want the fabric of this hat to be dense and tight. This will help you get the sizing right as well. If you're using 2 skeins for your hat like me, now is the time to join the second skein so that your join doesn't stick out in the brim. Side note, I first filmed this hat without randomizing the increases and you can really see the seam and distortion. I kept this video because the next step still applies. Regardless if you have any yarn left in the skein, cut a tail about 8 inches long, then tie a magic knot. I'll link to my other more detailed magic knot tutorial in the pattern, but this is a quick look at the process. You can also go a more traditional route and tie a knot, leave long tails, and then weave them in. I like the magic knot because I can trim the tails up to the knot and it will still hold under pressure. After working the number of rounds needed for your size, remove the first stitch marker and slip stitch. To slip stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through the stitch and the loop on your hook. Put back the first stitch marker and your hat top is complete. It should be flexible but stiff enough to hold its shape. Now we're ready to add the brim. You'll need 4 more stitch markers. Differentiate one of them with ribbon or washi tape to define the starting point of each round. Before we get started, count your stitches to make sure the total matches the pattern. I'm making a size adult small medium and I need 66 single crochet. If your stitch count is off, now's the time to add or remove increases to get it right. That said, if it's off by more than a stitch or two, you'll have to reevaluate your hat top. Now begin the brim by chaining 2 very tightly, right over the stitch marker. This chain 2 will count as 1 single crochet. For the next stitch, instead of working under the top 2 loops as usual, work in the front loops only. This applies to just the first brim round. I know this black yarn makes it harder to see, so here's a close-up of working in the front loops only. For the adult small medium size, work a total of 10 regular single crochets, or follow the count for your size. Remember the chain 2 counts as 1 single crochet, then work an increase and place a stitch marker into the second of the 2 single crochets. Before moving on, let's change out that first stitch marker to the one with washi tape so that I know where the round begins. Now repeat the pattern. Work 10 single crochet, then increase, and place another stitch marker. When you get to the second stitch marker from the hat top rounds, simply remove it and continue on. Repeat the pattern of 10 single crochet and 1 increase for the rest of the round. When you get back to the beginning, you should be working an increase right before the starting stitch marker, but you won't be placing a stitch marker in the second single crochet. Instead, work into the top of the chain 2 to start your next round, which will be worked seamlessly like the hat top. At this point, the hat is divided equally into 6 parts, and you can see how working in the front loops only helped guide the brim outward. In the same way you form the hat top, you will now work varied but symmetrical increases between each of the 6 stitch markers. You can follow the free pattern on my website or choose your own adventure. Just be sure that your increases are not too close to each other from round to round. For the second brim round, I decided to single crochet halfway to the next stitch marker, then increase. Remember, we're back to working in both top loops again. Single crochet to the next stitch marker, and repeat for all 6 sections. Note the stitch marker will always count as a stitch in the section to the left of it. To keep things even, do not work any more increases in the stitch marker spaces. For the last section, before the starting stitch marker, remember that the starting stitch marker counts as a stitch for the first section. Go right into starting the next round by working through the starting stitch marker. Choose another spot to increase, at least a couple stitches away from the increase from the previous round. Repeat for the rest of the sections, and work a total of 8 brim rounds in this manner. In the last stitch before the starting stitch marker, finish the last round with a slip stitch like you did the hat top. Cut a 6-inch tail and tie off the end. Your hat is almost complete. We're going to use the tail to clean up the brim shape as we weave it in. Thread the tail into a yarn needle, remove all the stitch markers, and then sew the tail into the last round of the brim to help smooth it out. Once the brim looks more even, weave in the rest of the tail another 1 to 2 inches, making sure it looks good from both sides, then cut off the excess. To slightly felt and stiffen up the hat, steam it and press it with an iron on its wool setting. I use that iron to help block the hat into shape as well. This only works if you're using a wool blend yarn. If you're worried about melting polyester, use a pressing cloth on the brim only and no steam. And that's it, you have a witch hat that is flexible but still holds its shape. For more tutorials and free patterns, visit DeliaCreates.com.